Okay, so you're making a very key distinction between the life of an innocent person and the life of a non-innocent person, right? A willful choice. When we make willful choices in life, there are consequences to those choices. One of the things that I think is very, very interesting is this concept of justice. And this weekend I happened to see two movies. One was The Equalizer with Denzel Washington, and the other one was Gone Girl with Ben Affleck. Okay? Both of them ultimately deal with taking human life. One has a very redemptive justice theme to it at the end, The Equalizer. The other one, it's all just left hanging out there, and so you walk away going, I don't know how I feel about this. The person that was behind this whole thing didn't get it in the end. And that seems vindictive. Imagine a world without justice. What would a world be like with where the Adolf Hitlers are just allowed to run rampant and have their way? Or even on a local level where, crimes are not punished. So we do make this distinction between innocent life, a baby, for example, or non-innocent life. And that's how we can kind of hold those two in tension. It's not an easy tension necessarily, right? Because let me throw this in and then we'll move on. When we talk about saving life, and we talk about what Bonhoeffer did to try to take the life of Adolf Hitler, do we make a distinction between that and, say, somebody that wants to kill an abortion doctor? Okay? There was a case just a few years ago where a person had killed an abortion doctor. They put him on trial and he said, absolutely, I'm guilty. And here's why. And then he made his case that here's an abortion doctor taking the lives of literally hundreds, perhaps thousands of innocent lives of children. And so I did what I could to prevent that. Is that person wrong or not? Okay? Now, depending on where you're coming from, people say, absolutely. Other people say, absolutely not. And then a lot of people go, I don't know. Okay? Here's the point. Here's the point with all of these, and particularly with Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Because what we also don't fully appreciate is that Bonhoeffer was actually a professing pacifist. Okay? Most people don't realize that, especially given the circumstances of his death. He was a pacifist. Of course, it's one thing to talk about pacifism if you're in safe confines of a classroom and we're having a spirited discussion. It's another thing if you're living under the shadow of Nazi Germany. And now I've got to figure out how do my beliefs fit with the world in which I'm having to engage. Where am I having to make certain adjustments? Okay? And back to Jeff's original point. There are some who would say, be a peacemaker. That means, doves and flowers and peace at all costs, no violence whatsoever. There's other people that use the phrase, as Ronald Reagan used to say, peace through strength, right? That using violence at times actually means being a peacemaker. It's just a different road to that final outcome. And good people stand on both sides of those kinds of debates, okay? But here's the point. We're all Dietrich Bonhoeffers. We're all Dietrich Bonhoeffers. Not that we're all put in situations where we have to decide if we're going to assassinate a head of state. And God forbid we ever are put in that kind of scenario. But Dietrich Bonhoeffer made the choices that he made because of his underlying worldview. He made the choices that he made because of certain things he believed about God, because of certain things that he believed that God was calling him to do or to be a part of. Much of it had to do with protecting the innocent, combating evil. He loved his country. And in fact, Dietrich Bonhoeffer made a very courageous choice. There were a lot of people here in the United States that in the early 40s had gotten him over here to the United States so he could attend school. He gets over here just for even weeks. I don't even know if it was months. While all this is still happening in Germany, and he's very aware of it, and realizes, I can't stay here. My fellow countrymen are going through this. I can't stay here. And while he had the option to stay and escape, and it's quite possible that he might be still alive today, He said, I'm going back. Didn't fully appreciate that he would pay the ultimate price for that. But all of his decisions ultimately were made by his worldview. He happened to have the Christian worldview. Not every person does. Okay? So here's what I want us to do for the next 6 to 8 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, depending on how well it goes. On each of your tables, there are 2 versions of USA Today from earlier this week. One from October 2nd, some of you have that, and one from USA Today weekend, okay? I don't necessarily need you to look through the whole thing. Let's just take the front section, section A, okay? Here's what I want you to do. Take a few minutes with the people around your table, look through this newspaper, okay? Just do some reading of the different stories in the paper. And I want us to come up with, I want each of you at your tables to come up with kind of a list of different stories that it's evident that there are different points of view at play in that particular story. Okay? Some of them are very obvious, right? So on the weekend version, for example, front page, below the fold, headline, gay marriage is all but inevitable. Okay? There are different points of view on that particular story. What I want you to do is just go through there and make some notes, highlight some of the stories in your copy, and then we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit. Okay? So work together with the people around your table.
As Christians deal with the news that we've been given, is that kind of what he was asking us? I personally think at this point that we need to go to story that would Christian.
You got communism on the other side. You have an atheist election here. Sexual assault on campus.
Headlines are It means we have to read it.
Okay, well, let's divide it up. Are you guys going to cover?
What are we reading?
Where is this start? Atheist politicians be elected from.
Should I read out loud? What are we reading?
Let's start with those that have the October 2nd version of USA Today. We'll start there. Anybody that had that copy of the paper, what are some issues that became evident to you as far as just potentially controversial, maybe different points of view? You don't necessarily have to give me all the pros and cons of each one, but I just want to kind of expose us to some of these different ideas. Yes, Greg.
We found the article on can atheist politicians be elected. Very interesting.
Okay, can atheist politicians be elected? You found that very interesting. Why? What was the...
We were saying kind of the core was that they were talking about, here's a guy from California who was the only open atheist in Congress, lost the election, and talking about the fact that you have, my opinion is you have a lot of people that probably, because it's socially acceptable and politically it's a good thing, they claim to be a Christian or they go to a church or there's some religion because they're more electable probably.
Yes, that in our particular culture, religion, and specifically Christian religion or Catholic religion, is socially acceptable. So it's actually better for you politically to say, yes, I'm a Catholic, or yes, I'm a Protestant, or an evangelical, or whatever, okay? If I were running for some kind of office in, say, Saudi Arabia, and I was running as a Christian in a Muslim country, that could be problematic, right? So it's the same kind of concept. So yes, in our particular culture, that is a very legitimate question as to can an atheist actually get elected. There's obviously kind of exceptions to the rule, but as a rule, it would be difficult.
Well, John,
Yes.
what about one nation under God?
Okay.
I mean, so, if you're an atheist,
Okay, what about one nation under God? In our particular culture, there are threads of God, biblical values, woven throughout our history. Okay, some people, we could have a long and lengthy debate on, are we a Christian nation? Have we ever been a Christian nation? The reality is we are not a non-religious nation. Okay? We are a religious nation more than not. Is there a certain percentage of people that are atheists and agnostics and skeptics? Yes, I have friends that are that way. In fact, one of the biggest stories that came out within the last year was the rise of the nuns. Okay, N-O-N-E, nun. And that comes from a poll that came out where if you are to check what kind of religion you are, and then there's the last category of none, that number is increasing pretty significantly in our culture. Now, a lot of people were trying to draw certain conclusions from that, some of which may have some merit, and some of which I think you're reading a little more into this than maybe there. But it doesn't change the fact that more and more people are not necessarily associating with a particular religion. Maybe it's because the choices on that list didn't fit them, so write none. Maybe it's because they're an atheist, they write none. Maybe it's I'm just kind of spiritual, but I'm not religious in that fundamentalist kind of way. Who knows, right? But this question is a biggie. What else?
My new friend Jerry here had a good point, and Mary wrote it down. He said absolutes for the older people in this class are not the same as absolutes for this generation.
Okay, interesting. Very interesting. Absolutes for older generation, our seasoned citizens, so to speak, okay? Absolutes for that particular generation are not the same as absolutes for younger generations. And that is absolutely correct. Okay? Come next week. Come next week. That will be the essence of our conversation. Okay? Are there absolutes? Should there be absolutes? If we believe there are absolutes, then how do we articulate those into a culture that doesn't believe in absolutes? That whole conversation is what we're talking about next week when we talk about truth. Okay? Navigating through the cultural wilderness. What else?
Well,
Yes.
We also talked about, one of our headlines was about Ebola.
Okay, Ebola.
And there are different sides to this debate as well. Do we seal our borders? Do we not allow people to come back in that have been exposed to Ebola? Or do we, as compassionate Christians, go to them and try to help them or bring them home, as in the case of some in the past, bring them home and treat them here? So it's a big debate.